Doctor.
Hey, man. Sorry, I was a little bit late, but my book just got delivered like just this minute, like 5 minutes ago.
This is perfect, man. Oh, buddy.
It just got delivered 5 minutes ago, so it's like kind of a little bit of shock here, but it looks really good. Yeah.
Oh, buddy. All right, so you got to do an autograph for me, and I got to come grab one from you if you got any available for the public.
Sure. This is the proof, but I will get some delivered in the next little while for sure.
Oh, so good, man.
It looks really good.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, man. I know that this has been oh my God, it's been a project for you, hasn't it?
God. Well, I talked to one of my ex-girlfriends who were still friends, and she says, you've been working on this book since 2008. It's like, oh yeah, man, that's true.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, you've probably been working on it in bits and pieces for longer.
Yeah.
Again, in my own project, I say it all started when I said to my wife, I said to her in about 2010, I feel nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think I said this to you at lunch the other day. I feel nothing. I don't feel like angry or depressed, but I don't feel like excited or inspired. And I was just completely lost, right? Like I was, it was kind of one of those weird spaces where I felt directionless and I didn't feel like I was connected to any sole purpose or meaning, and there was nothing inspiring me. So in order to feel, what does a guy like me do? Anything possible to be able to create a sense of feeling. And this is another part of our conversation we had. Yeah. I did triathlon, I did drugs and alcohol, and I did anything I could just to try to create that sense of feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like the third person that well, not that it's recent, but you're like the third person who said that to me in the last few days. Got a friend who's a comedian who I did comedy with in Vancouver, and he lives in Toronto now, and he says, I feel it's the same thing the last, probably month or so. It's like I don't feel anything. He says, I don't feel necessarily bad, but I'm just flat. And, sometimes I see that with people who are on antidepressants, like Prozac, Celexa, Paxil, those kind of things. The anxiety and depression will kind of go away, but the feeling of life won't come back. It just it numbs you out. You don't feel depressed. I have a quick thing. Yeah, we're all excited around the house. I was upstairs, just finished some meditation, and my wife brought it upstairs, and it was like I couldn't believe it when she showed it to me. It was like, wow.
I'm so excited for you, man.
It's just yeah.
I can't believe that it's actually like there. Oh my God, it's awesome. Hey, you got your drinks?
I got my drinks. I'm ready to rock.
Okay, so
that we want to touch on specifically, or
yeah, I got kind of a process that I want to work through so that we can kind of relate in. I mean, again, in the men and the women of iron and the freedom formula that I work with, I would say that most of my clients, Doc, are healthcare providers, most of them. I've got some people in the oil industry, and I got some other people that are business owners, etc. But what I find is the people that find me have lost that sense of meaning. They're looking for direction. They're lost in anxiety. They haven't been able to define things. And then even if they do, it's kind of like pulling a bow and shooting a moving target with a blindfold on, and it creates there's all kinds of things going on. They can't get traction anywhere. And that has an effect across every other area because their body has an effect, their relationships fall apart, their businesses are all over the place. So I help them with meaning and traction and helping them with the strategies. But within that, we work on little daily habits to make sure that things like anxiety and the stories that they're telling themselves, they're reworking through them a little bit, but it's still at a very superficial level. I mean, you and I love that you come out with this. It's just, I can't tell you how serendipitous it was that you posted the cognitive bypassing bit.
That just came to me. Like I wrote that thing in probably 45 minutes.
But that's it. So I find that so many people that are just kind of, things are crashing around them, particularly in the healthcare industry. They're either sedating shit,
Yeah.
or they've become exceptional
Yeah.
at cognitive bypassing. And
Right.
I'm one of those people. I'll either run and exercise it away, I'll sedate it away, or I've become very good at I mean, part of it is kind of reframing stories, but you got to be, what I'm learning anyway from you and from everybody else that I've been able to kind of tap into a little bit, is that there's just so much deeper. So here's what I think that would really benefit people that will listen to this from my standpoint, is I would like to start with a little bit of your background, because what I know is that you were working as a physician.
Right.
Something didn't work for you. You're studying and going deep into anxiety for a reason. Maybe just a couple minute background on that would be a great place to start.
Sure.
Do you mind going a little bit on that? I've got a couple people that are going to join just because I have a couple extra questions that I'd like them to ask you in a bit, but maybe just start with your background.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have all the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere.
Cool. So why don't you start with, start just from, you said that this all started in about 2008 for you, but maybe just do your background so that everybody has a good idea of where this all started and where it's come from. Why don't you do that?
Yeah. I guess, where it all kind of started from was I grew up with a father who was schizophrenic and bipolar. So my childhood had a lot of chaos in it. So to make sense of chaos, I escaped into my head. So everything became a cognitive restructure because it wasn't safe to go into my body. And that's basically what my book is about we go into our heads when it isn't safe to be in our body. This old trauma that we have when we grow up, we don't deal with it cognitively. We stuff it down into our body. So the only way to escape that pain is to go up into our heads and overthink things. And then if you have a tendency to be smart, which a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of the people that work with you are, we start going for what we know. So the smarter you are in a way, the worse it works against you, because you start doing things cognitively, and unconsciously and consciously you start seeing, man, if I just do it this way, if I use my brain, A, I get ahead of the trauma, and B, I start getting ahead. I was a doctor, a stand-up comedian, a yoga and meditation teacher. Like it never really stopped because I kept going into the cognitive, looking for this safety. Really, it wasn't really that I was looking for, enlightenment, or I was looking for a fulfilling job or whatever. I was running, and I sublimated that energy into, getting good grades for medical school and doing everything that I needed to become, cognitively successful. But to become cognitively successful and to become successful at a feeling level are often not the same. I see lots and lots of people who have experienced tremendous success. You look at them financially, they're doing really well. And I talk to them and they're like, man, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. It's just things are flat.
That was me. That was me. Everything looked good from the outside, but nobody could tell that there was a piece of my soul that was just dying from the inside.
And so where do you think that came from with you? Was it the same kind of thing? Like you had some childhood wounding and you didn't want to face it, so you went up into your head, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I have processed a certain amount of this, and I had some childhood stuff around hockey that was a little bit stressful for me, and right. I had there was definitely some family issues, so I became kind of the negotiator with a very emotionally volatile kind of place, and so I learned that, like, for me, this is the story that I tell, was that I was constantly trying to figure out, well, where does that emotion come from? So I immediately went into my head, and God forbid, I didn't want to own it or feel it. I just wanted to figure it out. There's your I learned how to cognitive bypass from an early age because I'm always trying to figure out, well, and empathize almost with where the chaos is coming from. Mm-hmm. That was, I think, where a lot of mine stemmed from.
Yeah. So I think, what we do is we're searching to make sense of it, like especially when we're young, like we're always like that. It's just this never ending challenge when we're kids to constantly make sense of our world. And if there's trauma there, if there's a lot of chaotic, emotional stuff, it gets in the way of explaining stuff. So you really have to kind of shove the emotions away and just deal with it cognitively. And it does give you this false sense of security, especially if you're smart and especially if you can, handle things. Were you the oldest in your family? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So, and oldest boys too, like the oldest of any, like doesn't matter, male or female, typically, gets the brunt of it. If, whatever childhood trauma is, like our parents have traumas too. And if they don't deal with them, they get handed down to us, and it's usually the oldest that picks it up. Not always. And especially if the trauma is like, for me, the trauma in my family was mostly my dad being schizophrenic and bipolar. Me being the oldest boy, I kind of got that. And I hear that with the females too. Like if their mother is the problem with alcoholism or addiction or whatever, and they're the oldest girl, they tend to get the brunt of it too. And one more thing, and those are the ones that become overachievers. And that's why, the firstborns are typically the ones that are the overachievers. Just what I've observed anyway.
Well, my question for you there is that's really the path that you went. You basically took it and you applied it in a very constructive way, as opposed to many people go very destructively. You may have had other destructive patterns, and we can talk about those. But the thing is that you applied it constructively. You put it into a medical career. My question, I think, is really about, well, why did you were going along a good way, and you recognized that maybe there were some of the traumas there. What was the pinnacle for you that changed you off the course that you were on to make you go, okay, I got to start dealing with this? What happened for you?
Okay, I'll give you the thing. So my mindset when I was younger, unconsciously, was I have to fix my dad. And that started, he was okay until I was about probably 10, 11, 12. And then around 12, he started being admitted to the hospital and suicide attempts and that kind of stuff. And it was like there was something unconsciously that went off in my mind like that point. I have to help my dad. And then until he committed suicide, which is like 14 years after that, because I was 26, and I just got into medical school after he had committed suicide. So I never got a chance to tell him, which is something that really kind of, preys on me for sure. But what I did was I tried, almost by proxy to heal him. I thought if I could become a doctor, I could heal him. Right. Of course, this is, I knew that he had horrible schizophrenia and bipolar, and I knew I couldn't heal him. But unconsciously, that's the thing for a son, is like you want to heal. So what happened was I became over responsible. I became the person who helps everybody else, but doesn't really actually do that much for himself. Right. So what would happen was I just burned out. But I kept going. I kept going, and my identity, that whole physician, Dr. Russell Kennedy, that whole indoctrination, took me over. It became part of my identity. And I talk about this in the book too, about, there's very few jobs that actually burn the title right into your name. Like I was Dr. Russell Kennedy. You don't get Jackhammer Jones or Plumber Johnson or something like that. I guess maybe Jackhammer Jones could be an adult film actor, but I'm just saying, that.
There's one just for you, Sonny. I love it.
But in general, it got burned into my identity, and there was kind of some sublimation there. Like I was getting some status, because when I was a kid, I never really felt like I got some status. I got teased a little, a fair amount of different places, but there's parts of my childhood I didn't get teased at all. So it was this thing about looking after other people. And after a while, I think my soul started to rot, because it was like, look, you're really, really good at looking after, and all my friends, even my guy friends, they'll cry in front of me. They'll tell me what's going on, as long as it's just him and I, so I've always had that. People come up to me and like, they tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, and working in a clinic, one of the things in Vancouver when I worked at a clinic is I had 7 minutes with people. So what I would stop doing as the shift went on and I get farther and farther behind, I stopped touching people. Because as soon as I touch them, and you as a chiropractor know that, as soon as you touch someone, they start spilling their guts. They start telling you everything, right? And, you hear about, someone's dad beating them from the time they were 5 till they were 12 and stuff. I've got 7 minutes. I can't start opening up that can of worms. And so what I eventually just burned out because A, I wasn't looking after myself, and B, I could see the traumas these people were in, and I in 7 or 10 minutes I could do nothing about it but give them medication, which was really a difficult thing. And I'm not anti-meds because I think psych meds can be life-saving at points, but it was a real philosophical thing for me, just giving people who were functioning medication, because basically my problem wasn't so much when the antidepressants didn't work. My problem started when the antidepressants did work, because they would come in with all this trauma. I would numb them out, and then they don't want to go off the medication because you don't want to go back and revisit that stuff. So it just became this thing. I'll just finish this because I need to get this point out because I tend to ramble. So what happened with me was I learned, so I would have to look after my dad, and I transferred my dad onto everyone else. So I had to help everyone else, but I left myself behind the whole time. And then, after a while, when you leave that child in you behind for too long, your soul starts to rot, and then that child starts acting out like, look, we need some attention here. So, and that's kind of when I crashed was, and that's another story. When I ruptured my Achilles tendon, because I'm an arrogant physician and I injected my own Achilles tendon with cortisone and bupivacaine. And like an idiot, right? Because it worked once. The 2 years before it worked like a charm. I was off to Croatia and I was able to walk around and do all this sort of stuff, and then it started flaring up on me again, and I thought, maybe I'll try it again.
Magic cortisone, I love it.
Oh. And that's the thing right now with Trump, right? Like he's getting these really advanced treatments, but we don't know what's going to happen to him. I know I'm kind of, going off the pail here a little bit.
No, that's
but,
fine.
it's just, those things about being a physician is that we can treat ourselves. And often some of the treatments that we give are not that, they're helpful in the short term, but in the long term, they really can cause a lot more damage than they do good.
But you kind of have treated yourself. And I think this is the next topic I wanted you to cover, is that ultimately, you say that you burnt out, but you really went into an investigation of how you could really assist yourself, I think, in dealing with like the overwhelming feelings that you were having. And like you were reflecting like in the mirror and all of these different people. You've obviously, your book just arrived at your place today. So you've obviously had an opportunity. Yes, so cool.
But 5 minutes before we did this, it came in.
You've obviously had an opportunity not just to work in creating systems and programs and solutions for those people that have anxiety, because that's what the book is about. But you've obviously had some success in being able to kind of treat yourself through some of your own processes.
Yeah.
And this has almost become your new meaning or purpose, is to be able to open this topic to go, I'm assuming, moving away from just the only way of dealing with it is kind of medicating it away, right, which is the quick physician's route. And then you've discovered this whole new world that when I hear you talk and when I watch you and study you, it's not small. There's so much to this, right?
Yeah.
So this has become part of your passion and part of your purpose. Are there things that you have found, whether it's superficial or deep, have you found like things that the average person can actually utilize? What would you recommend for the average person that just has no idea that they're even entranced in this?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's really comes down to focusing on the sensation in your body when you start getting emotional, like mentally stressed, right? Because what happens when we get mentally stressed is we go into survival brain. We go into sort of the old primitive survival brain. And when we do that, we lose blood flow to our prefrontal cortices. So we don't, as we get more into survival mode, we actually can't think straight. So I tell people, don't bother trying until you can get back into your body. So the thing is, I said, like, don't add feelings, don't add thinking to a bad feeling. Because if you can stick with that feeling, it's not that bad. You know, one of the things I tell people all the time is find your alarm. You know, think of something that really troubles you. I mean, don't pick your number one fear, but pick something that really troubles you, and you close your eyes. And I think I did this with you the other day when we had coffee. It's like, where do you feel that in your body? You know, and almost always it's somewhere between your chin and your pubic bone. It's usually in the midline. And there's, you know, like a pressure, a hot, cold sensation to it. And that's kind of like your younger self asking for your attention. And we typically, you know, distract away, we addict away from it or whatever. So it's a matter of finding that and then just kind of putting your hand over it and really reassuring yourself that you're there for this part of you, which I still believe is your younger self that's asking you for your attention. Specifically, it was with me. Rather than get into the endless machinations of the mind, because the mind will always try and pull you into that cognitive space. And really to metabolize or work through this feeling that you've got to feel it. Like, you have to get in touch with it and feel it and allow it to sit there and see what kind of messages it has for you. Because as soon as we start getting into the explanation of it, we lose it. You know, our right brain, the insula is part of our, we have it on both sides, but the insula really connects our body and our mind. And as soon as we get into that emotion, as soon as we go into trying to, okay, what is this, you know, what is this explanation? You know, what's going on here? And we go into the left brain, we lose the isness of that emotion. Now, I know I'm saying, you know, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? And on some level, that's fine. But really, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll feel that emotion and there'll be this compulsion to try and figure your way out of it, which I call cognitive bypassing. And really, it's just sitting with it. And sometimes we do have to figure it out cognitively, what's going on. Like, okay, well, how does this feel? What is this? Is this related to, you know, my bad day? Is this related to fighting with, you know, my son or whatever? But a lot of times it's just sitting there the extra 30, 60 seconds with it and just seeing what else is there. Like, and one of the things I always like to say is don't take your mind's first offer. You know, so if you feel something and then you get your hand on it, you feel it, it's like, oh, this is because I'm worried about having to do this talk tonight or whatever. Maybe that's not it. You know, don't take your mind's first offer. Like, sit with it for a while. But it's uncomfortable for a while until we get used to the fact. So the thing that I would say to everybody is, you know, see if you can let the thoughts just sit there and go by like a parade. It's kind of like meditation. But feel it in your body and just kind of see if there's any message there for you. But don't actively look for it. Yeah, go ahead.
So the question is this. So I hear you when you say don't take your mind's first story or whatever.
Yeah.
Because ultimately there's different stories that our brain just locks itself out from looking at and having an opportunity to look at. Okay, because sometimes we just have to consider that there's actually other stories other than the one that our brain is kind of locked into or addicted to. But what happens, there is somebody that asked on the post the other night, I get into a plane, I'm fine. The door shuts and I can't contain it.
Right.
So this is probably pushing more beyond anxiety into a state of almost panic. But what do you have suggestions for those of us that are functioning on low levels of anxiety almost constantly, and then you have just a little kick and it's like boom, the lid is flipped? Is there something we can do to, I don't know, self-regulate, or do you have any suggestions around those things?
Well, it's very yogic. It's very, you know, feel into your body and really focus on your breath. Like, focus on the minutia of the temperature of your breath going in and out of your nostrils.
That's it.
You know, rub your fingers together. One of the little exercises that I do, if you're not in the grocery store or on a plane or something, is cross your hands over the midline and touch your face. Because if you look at the neuroscience of it, right, like, it's very difficult to do anything else with your brain because your brain has so much it has so much real estate associated with your hands and your face that as soon as you put your hands on your face, your brain is kind of overwhelmed and you have to come into the moment at that point because your brain is so overwhelmed with sensation at that point. it can't sort of project you into the fear of the future. And it grounds you. It is one of those things that's grounding. And everybody has their own little, like with me, I put my hand on my solar plexus. Sometimes I do that thing like they teach you in yoga class where you rub your hands together really and you get some heat and you put it over your eye sockets. It's all really about getting into sensation, because the sensation itself, the outside of panic attacks and even sometimes within panic attacks, but the sensation of alarm itself is not that bad. What happens to us is that we start attaching thoughts to it. And I see this with people with panic attacks. First few panic attacks people have, they feel flushed, they feel weird, they look around like, what's happening to me? Everyone else seems normal. But as soon as they get the thought, oh, this could be a stroke, oh, this could be a heart attack, that's when everything blows up. So so we can handle the alarm. It's just the story that we attach to the alarm makes it a runaway train at that point.
Yeah, because then what happens is you can't get, theoretically, we can't get off the idea that, like, listen, I'm going to die. So the body just goes into complete fight or flight. Yeah, I get it. Okay.
And on top of that, just to top that off, so as soon as we go into fight or flight like that, we go into survival brain, we lose blood flow out of our rational brain. So even that thought, I'm having a heart attack, even if you're a 29-year-old guy who's like a very fit, that all of a sudden becomes a possibility. And a very real, it seems really real, because when we get into our survival brain, we evolutionarily, we are trained to look for threats and on top of that, filter out safety. So anything that would suggest to us that we're safe at that point, we have a blind spot for, and all we can see is fear. So it's just gonna roll on itself. So if you can bring yourself in a sensation of the moment at that point, at least you've got something that will counteract this kind of runaway train of fear. But your brain will try and teach you or tell you, you've got to think your way out of this, but your brain's impaired. So
you can see this too. When you're in fight or flight, there's no thinking, there's no rational thought. You'll see people that are in confrontation, conflict, and the things that come out of their mouth are like, you would never say these types of things because they're just in fight or flight. Okay, so we've been able to self-regulate ourselves. So we've been able to get to a place where we've been able to get into feel. What's the next step for people?
Well, it's staying in there as long as you can, actually, and that's when sometimes you'll get the messages, because if you can get into that feeling state, especially if you just come out of an alarm, a position of alarm, it's probably an age regression. If you're alarmed over something, like the guy who got into the plane and the thing, that's claustrophobia. That's probably old. That's probably, it wouldn't surprise me if I said, just like when that plane door, it's like, well, my brothers used to lock me in a closet when I was 5 years old and I couldn't get out. It's those type of emotional, body memories that come up. There's not a whole lot of cognition that's involved. So you have to fight that on its own turf. So it's a very much a feeling state. So you have to create a contrary feeling state to that. Now, once you brought yourself back in and you got into some breathing, you're using some stuff where you're back into the moment, you're back into sensation, then you can kind of slowly introduce thoughts again. But it is one of those things that while you're in it, you can't see it. And the other thing is that your brain's impaired. How they train fighter pilots is they put them in a room, they suck all the oxygen out of the room slowly, and then one of them will get nausea, one of them will get their fingertips will start to light up, one of them will get a really bad headache, and they say, stop. This is your tell. This is your sign that your cockpit is losing oxygen. Because if you go past this point, then you lose the brain capacity to understand that you're actually losing oxygen.
Got it. So everybody responds differently to a loss of oxygen is basically what you're saying, is that each of us have a slightly different tell. And when that's happening, you're done. Stop.
So as soon as you get the tell, that's when you can make the change. If you go another 20 seconds further, like if you're getting into a fight with your spouse or your partner, if you go 10 seconds farther into that fight, you will lose the ability to get yourself out of it. So it's like, I know I'm going this way. This is what my tell is. I start getting this really, my hands start to clench or whatever. That's the point where you can kind of pull yourself out. You can kind of eject out of that. But if you go another 10 seconds, You're in a survival brain, your rational brain's gone, you're arguing, from your, emotional survival brain, and you literally can't be rational at that point.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Zero idea of what you're talking about. Okay. So tell us, I want to entertain another couple of questions because sure. I know Sunny wanted to ask a couple of questions, but give us a little bit of a background for those that want to know more, and that you laid out your entire thought process. Well, I know that you had to reduce it a little bit to actually get it into writing, but give us just a little bit of an overview of what can I expect if I picked up your book. Who is it intending to help?
Well, I think it's, I think it shows everybody how we fall into traps. And I think it's one of those things that we don't see it ourselves. So there's two entities. Like people say, oh, I have anxiety. And I don't even like that term, anxiety. I said, use the term alarm, because alarm has some consciousness to it. It really does have a feel around it. Because if you're out for lunch with someone and you say, I'm feeling anxious, they may not have a clue of what you're talking about. But if you say, I'm feeling alarmed, everyone's felt alarmed. They can relate to you at that kind of point. So it's all about what I call the alarm anxiety cycle. So we get triggered. Sometimes we don't even know what triggered us. Like the client of yours that as soon as the cabin door closes, he freaks out. So that's a trigger for him. So as soon as you get that trigger, what's going to happen is your mind is compulsively going to try and make sense of that trigger. It's also going to try and compulsively make sense of what's going on in your body, because your mind is a meaning-making, make-sense machine. That's what it does. So as soon as it feels this uncomfortable sensation in your body, it's going to make an uncomfortable story in your mind. It may have nothing to do with what's going on right now. So what will happen is that you'll get this alarm feeling, you'll get triggered, your brain will make up a story, your body will believe it because that's what the body does. The alarm goes up, which pulls you back into survival mode even more, which doesn't allow you to rationally examine your thoughts. So your thoughts look more real and more dangerous than they really are. And on top of that, your brain is filtering out cues of safety. So you get into this, what I call alarm anxiety loop. So there's this alarm in your body, there's the anxiety in your mind, and they just loop on each other. So it's how can you recognize, how can you see your tells that you're heading into it? How can you get yourself in a sensation of your body? How can you feel centered and grounded, putting your feet flat on the floor, doing that thing where you cross your hands and touch your face, pulling yourself in a sensation of the moment. And then that starts this virtuous cycle of, yeah, I'm okay. Blood flow starts returning back into your prefrontal cortex. You can kind of see, yeah, I was going a little crazy there. I lost my mind a little bit. And then you can kind of bring yourself back into normal daily functioning. And then a lot of it too is just practicing it when you're not alarmed.
There. But let me just stop you there for a sec, because sure. Ultimately what I've learned about me and about several of the clients that I work with is that there's oftentimes these stories or these wounds or these whatever that are kind of running in the background of your computer, just like all the apps that are opened on your phone or whatever. They're constantly running. And what I found for me was that I would get up in the morning, and before I started applying some of the science behind all this, I would get up every morning and I would just have a knot in my stomach. There was something, I would be anxious, I'd be in fear, I'd be in panic. And then I started examining the stories. But before I could really examine the stories and make sense of them, I had to learn the subtle art of actually going and meditating and taking time for myself to just pull myself out of the state of anxiety. And I would go and meditate, Doc, and I would still, in my meditation, I'd be thinking about 68,000 things. I wasn't enabling myself to actually slip in between the thoughts so that there would be silence and still. So I was actually still staying in a state of alarm. I wasn't able to actually process different logical loops. Mm-hmm. What I just didn't understand about the process was, once I got through what I thought were my big things, there's so much more that's going on. And it almost is a never-ending process. The number of times I go back to stories of like the same thing keeps popping up, and I'm like, well, maybe I just haven't seen. I tell myself the benefits and the drawbacks if it hadn't occurred, and I've examined all the different things, but I really haven't equalized it. So it keeps popping up. It keeps popping up to teach me something, right? I think it's just the practice of doing it. What you said there was the practice of doing this type of work, even when you don't feel like you're in alarm, is so important, because it's like it builds, and then it's like, boom, the Mount St. Helens has to erupt. Yeah, it comes out, right?
No, that's exactly it. It's practicing it when you're not feeling alarmed, which is what most of us don't do, and I'm as guilty of that, falling off my meditation practice. I mean, I've been editing this book and fixing it for the last few weeks. I haven't meditated in 2 weeks. So it's kind of like, and every day I tell myself, you should, and then I feel bad about it. And then when I feel bad about it, that makes me even not want to do it even more. So it's kind of like, but it is this kind of, and I know that I'll fall back, but I think it's really this taking this small steps to it, So today, just before, I got on here, I sat there for, it was like 7 minutes. Wasn't any real horrendous length of time. But it was just, I wasn't feeling particularly bad or upset or whatever, but I just thought, I'm just going to sit in here for a while, because then when it's there when you need it. And, that's the thing about meditation, is that it basically teaches you to watch your thoughts. What I call my little catchphrase in there: when you can see your thoughts, you don't have to be your thoughts, right? So it allows me to see them and just kind of let them go by and not like get in there, because as soon as you get in there, the alarm starts up again. And then when the alarm starts up, we lose the ability to really grab it again. So it is that practice of, multiple times a day. And I talk about this in the book about ABCs, is be aware. Like right now, I'm actually feeling okay. Can I take, 30 seconds and just close my eyes and just breathe? Can I do that? And then the A is for awareness, the B is for, body or breath, getting into your sensation. And the C is having a little compassion for yourself, and that's hard for a lot of us, cognitive, what we started this whole little interview out with, or this talk out with, was this cognitive drive that we have. It's very difficult for us to put that down, because it does provide a sense of seeing like we're getting somewhere. I got to be a physician. I got to be a stand-up comedian for my intellect. So it does serve you on some level, but at some point, the mind's got to be your servant. It can't be your master. And I think it's really getting into that sort of, that kind of Zen state a number of times a day. And it doesn't have to be very long, it can be just 30, 45 seconds of just showing your brain unconsciously, there is a different way. We don't always have to be processing stuff. We can just sort of shut it off, but you can't shut it off when you're in alarm. That's the thing. It's really difficult. So it's practicing during the day, just taking 30 seconds and just kind of going, yeah, what's going on? How do I feel? What's going on my fingertips? What's going on? And as sort of, new agey and whatever it sounds, is unconsciously you're training your brain that you don't always have to be on. And it's not, and if you're not on, and more importantly, if you're not on, the whole world isn't going to collapse.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find myself just in complete overwhelm sometimes, because I take on too many things and don't say no. And I get to a point where I'm almost mumbling. And
yeah.
It's the same thing. I have to just, I will often go out of my office, go sit in my car, and I'll put on a verbal meditation.
Yeah.
Just for 5 minutes, and I come back just so that I'm somewhat self-regulated, so that I can actually be logical.
Yeah.
With people. It's unbelievable how just like you said, the shortest period of time. I tell people all the time, like 3-minute meditations are wonderful.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, it doesn't have to all be Zen. I haven't done it for a while actually, but it just reminded me when you said this. I was a car screamer for many years. I would go into the car and just let it go, and then I would come back into the clinic.
That's awesome.
I would come back into the clinic and be like, okay, what are you coming in to see me about? Because I blew up my vocal cords, right? So, the receptionist would see me. I go, hey, I got to go up for a few minutes. And then I come back and go, oh, okay, was my first patient back in, or what am I doing? Because I'd blown out my vocal cords from screaming in the car.
Yeah.
You know, but it did help. Like it did discharge some of that energy. So I'm not all this, you know, you have to sort of get into the Zen moment and feel your body and just come in and allow, because it doesn't work that way, you know. Like sometimes you just have to go in the car and scream.
I'm definitely the same way. At the pinnacle of some of my most frustrating moments, I will definitely go and I mean, I'll go and kickbox, but there's times where I will be driving into my office and it will be a good 10 minutes and people are driving by me going, you know, doing one of these as I'm yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs, driving in. It's absolutely happened. Now listen, I have a couple other things, but I wanted to see if, Sunny, can I put you on just for a second? Sunny, I think you can relate to this, although I don't see you unmuted yet.
Okay.
I think there's a couple of things you could relate to, the whole putting your hands on people and then having people just spill their beans, hey?
Oh, absolutely. And I've had people tell me, like probably within 5 to 10 minutes of having my hands on someone, it's like they tell the deepest, darkest, dirtiest secrets of their whole life story and their extended family, and they're like, you're just so easy to talk to.
Yeah. So just to bring background, Doc, Sunny, I mean, you're still doing massage work in town, but you've been moving into this transition of, like Dr. Russell, there's this piece inside of you that you have this almost need to help people at a bigger level. So why don't I throw out there, are there any questions that you could throw at the doc here?
I love the perspective that he has shared with this book. And a lot of it I kind of already knew, but Doctor, you added a lot of extra details that I didn't know. My question is, you know, an adult that's seeking to, everyone's seeking to fix themselves to some extent, but I don't want to say fix. Everyone's seeking something to help relieve their anxiety. An adult can do that, but, you know, I think in terms of my 17-year-old daughter that is dealing with depression and anxiety, and she refuses to talk to anyone. She has taken herself off medication. And so, you know, how would you get this book in front of a 17-year-old and actually get them to read it?
Yeah. Well, the book's, I mean, I wrote it, you know, there's some humor. There's definitely some humor in the book. It's not something that's sort of this, you know, diatribe about, you know, neuroscience and that kind of thing. There's definitely a lot of my own life, you know. But I think really a lot of what anxiety is, it's just truly a separation from yourself. It really is. And it's really that mind-body disconnect. What I was saying earlier on is that trauma gets stored in our body when we're younger and we can't hold it in our minds. And then we don't want to go there because the reason we stuffed that trauma down in the first place was it was uncomfortable. So we do go up into our heads. We do start living in our heads, and you can only live in your head for so long until, you know, life just starts losing its meaning, or you start getting incredibly alarmed or depressed or whatever. Now, you know, when you talk about teenagers, here's the thing with teenagers is that they're so addicted to their screens. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's something called the social engagement system that works in our brain. Dan Siegel calls it the human resonance circuitry, and has the superior temporal gyrus, the insula, the mirror neurons, this kind of stuff. And it matures with face-to-face contact. You know, facial expression, you know, the face is the only place in the human body where the muscles are actually attached to the skin directly. You know, prosody of voice, tone of voice, body language, that kind of stuff matures our brains to the point where we can soothe another person. And then when we can soothe another person, when that social engagement system is matured, we can also turn that social engagement system on ourselves and connect to ourselves and soothe ourselves. And I think that's when we start getting to the deeper traumas, and we start seeing that we're there for ourselves, because when we were younger and we had these traumas, people weren't there for us. Otherwise, the traumas wouldn't have been buried in us. So it's really learning how to re-engage that social engagement system. So it's, and I'm not surprised that she's disengaging, because if you don't feed that social engagement system, it's kind of like social anxiety disorder. If you're not comfortable with eye contact, if you're not comfortable with facial, if you can't read facial expression, you know, it'd be like if somebody said, hey, you know, we're having a huge curling bonspiel this weekend and we need a new skip. You know, like, Russ, can you do that? And I've never curled before. I'm not going to go out curling if I've never, and be in a position of authority when I've never done it before. So I don't blame people with social anxiety, because the wiring that's supposed to be set up hasn't. So, and then on top of that, what happens is they go back to their, when they feel depressed, anxious, they go back to their screens and they get this dopamine hit, but they're not getting the long-term oxytocin hit that would allow them, to feel, you know, connected and close. So what I would sort of start, and you got to start slowly too. What I would start slowly with her is just say, you know, I've learned about this thing called the social engagement system, and Dan Siegel's really great at it too. And you can certainly contact me. I can give you some information as well. But it's just about how we can connect with each other just for very short periods of time. And it will help with your depression. And it does, you know, so it's like, just, you know, can we just make some eye contact just for 5 seconds? Can you make it a game on some level? Now I know with, you know, teenagers at 14, 15, it's almost impossible to connect with them. But it's really like, this is what I'm trying to do. And I've always thought this would be a great game around the kitchen table, is like, hey, I'm going to make a face and I want you to tell me what emotion I'm feeling. Right? Especially for younger kids, you know, because that trains their brain to kind of have that social engagement that matures that system so that they can soothe themselves. So what I would do with your daughter is just really explain to her that she's probably on some level separated from herself, and that she has to, you know, find herself and connect there. And you can do that through your body, you know, putting your hands on your chest, on your abdomen, just having that sense, even, you know, rubbing your fingertips together, even having that sense that this is me, like I'm here, because that feeling of depression and anxiety comes from just not being connected to yourself, and then not being connected to others, because your relationship with other people can be no better than your relationship with yourself, and your relationship with yourself can be no better than the relationship you have with other people. So I know it's kind of a long, drawn-out answer, but I think the way that we're going to heal our kids, specifically with depression and anxiety, is to show them they can connect with themselves, to show them they can connect with us, and to do it slowly, because you can't jump right in there, because if they are kind of gun shy of closeness and connection, if you jump in there with this huge, I want to love you, I want to connect with you, that's going to set off their alarm, and they're going to go back, they're going to withdraw into themselves. So it's kind of like, what I call it is like catching an 8-pound trout on 4-pound test. You know, like you go out there and, you know, you let them take a bite, and if they run, you let them run, you know, and you just show them, look, I'm here. And just, I want to show you how you can be there for yourself too, because this is what's going to help you long term, is the feeling like you're alone, the feeling like you're separated from yourself. And it's just basically, it comes down to a connection with yourself, laughter, play. You know, what did she do when she was, you know, 6, 7, 8? Did she paint? Did she ride her bike? You know, these are the kind of things to kind of introduce play back in there too. And it's all really about reconnecting with yourself. And then once you can do that, it's so much easier to start seeing the color in the world.
Totally. And I think that I see this as well, Sonny. I'm not the expert in this part of it, but because my kids are still like 10 and 11, and they're beautiful little kids. They haven't hit that ever. But what I see a lot is the pressuring, and the as soon as they feel guilt and shame, then it's the unwinding part of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can think of that you would appreciate some guidance on?
Yeah, like, you know, we touched on my business with the massage therapy, and how people just tend to just open right up whenever you lay hands on them. A lot of people like to seek advice, and they just want to dump everything out on you, but they don't want to do anything with the tools that you give them.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So at what point, I mean, do you recognize anything specific in a person knowing that they're truly seeking answers?
Yeah, I think with me, I mean, the story that I often tell is like, I remember seeing patient of mine, and I thought, I felt a lump in her breast, and I thought, man, this could be cancer. And she said to me, do you think this is cancer? And, I can either honestly answer as a physician saying, yes, it is really suspicious for that, or I can ask her, well, what makes you think that it might be cancer? Which buys me some time, and then it allows her to talk. And then she said, well, my aunt had cancer, and my mother had cancer, and that turned out she didn't. But and like, I'm really, kind of concerned. And then we got into that kind of tone of discussion, is like, how was your relationship with them? The other thing that I would say is like, how are you, because clearly you're an empath, clearly I can read that in you. So it's like, what's your compulsion is the first word that came in. I don't mean it that way, but what's your desire to help people? Because sometimes when we desire to help people is we start doing most of the talking, we start doing most of the helping. And usually what I try and, tell others, practitioners and stuff is like, try and get them to talk, try and get them to say, well, why do you think that? Like, why would you, and it's almost like a mirroring. Chris Voss talks about this. He was an FBI negotiator, and just repeating 2 or 3 of the last words in their sentence, just so that they feel, because everybody wants to feel seen and heard, right? So a lot of people who are struggling with anxiety and depression never felt seen or heard, and still aren't seen or heard by their own systems. So if you can show them that they are by allowing them to talk more and elaborating, well, tell me more about that. Like, I'm really interested in that kind of, like, why you would think that. And then, that's when they walk out of there feeling on top of the world, because they've been seen and heard. It's not so much that they want the advice. They just want to be really heard, and then often when you give them, when you give them that sounding board, they'll solve their own problems a lot of the time, And then it's us, and I have that compulsion too, Sonny. Like, I have that, I'm the helper. I'm the guy that can fix this. Man, I can do this. I've done this before. Oh, Dr. Kennedy, you're so great. And it's just like, after a while, it just becomes really hollow. And I just found it really, really key to encourage them to talk, and don't be afraid of silence. Don't be afraid of silence. Like, because we do have that urge as healthcare providers to provide the answers. And like, if it gets awkward, sometimes I'll call it. It's like, I'm letting this get a little bit awkward, because sometimes that's when the best answers come up. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for them to understand that you empower them, you hear them, you see them, and that they can express what they need to express, because they'll solve their own problems. They'll walk out of there thinking you're great, but you haven't said much of anything. No, it's true. Like, I found
it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to guide the right questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I find myself doing is, guiding questions, maybe to offer up a different perspective that is relevant to what they're saying, and, absolutely repeating the things that they say to make sure they've been heard. And I mean, there's a lot of words that go into my ears on a daily basis. And
yeah. And sometimes, what I'll do is I'll shock them. It's like, this first thing that came to my mind, it's like, do you really hate your wife? And it's like, no, I don't hate her. Jeez, no. And it's like, and then I'll tell them, it's like, I did that to kind of shock you, just so that your brain kind of gets a bit of a reset, so you can see things from a very different angle. The other thing that Kyle Cease talks about, he's a comedian who's turned like transformational speaker, and he's quite brilliant. And he says at the end of everything that someone says negative about themselves, he says, and I love that about myself. Like I would say something like, I can be a bit of a narcissist sometimes. And I love that about myself. Because what it does is it really flips it on its ear. So you're not going down the exact same mental track every time, that same neural wiring track. When you say, and I love that about something that you are blaming yourself for or shaming yourself for, you open up a brand new world of possibilities in there. Because before it was this railroad track that you had, put yourself down. And now you're kind of looking at the opposite, like, this is great. I just lost $5,000 gambling on the Jets game. And I love that about myself. It really gives you this real different, not that I've lost $5,000 betting on a Jets game, but it really does give you this very different cognitive view of the way you've always looked at things. And then they have a chance to open up.
That's priceless.
Very good.
I love it. Anything else you can think of, Sunny?
Not that I can think of. I'll probably think about 20 questions here in about an hour, but you know.
I get it. Trust me. And I think that part of my ego always wants to. I want to be able to help you. I can empathize with you. I can see the path. I've got the solution for you. Obviously, my way is the way that you need to.
Just do what I want you to do.
Totally. We do it with our kids, and I'm right. The righteousness of it all is actually quite funny. Okay, so I guess the big question that I have, just to kind of close this a little bit as we talk a little bit about what really I want people to know that they have access to you, Doc, through now the release of your book. But you and I talked just briefly the other day, and I don't want to open a can of worms if you don't want to go there, but there's a certain type of people that Sunny likes to help. There's a certain type of person that I like to help. Is there a certain person that you're really looking to sort of connect with? Can you share that with us at all? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, no, I used to bond a lot with teenagers, for sure, because I think I saw myself as a wounded teenager, and I really wished somebody would have, taken me under the wing when I was a teenager. And anyone who's really struggling with a parent, those are the people that I kind of bond to, because I know exactly the helplessness and the strange role reversal that goes on when you look after a parent. And it's so common, it's so common, especially with like narcissistic parents and that kind of thing, because they start twisting their children into helping them all the time, to the point where they think that that's normal. It's normal to just to compulsively help people as opposed to looking after yourself. So I would say teenagers are one that I feel drawn to, especially the ones that are struggling with a parent. And then anybody, it doesn't matter if you're 50 and you've got a parent who's, getting dementia and they're 75. Like, I really feel for that, because I think there is this sense of, I really wish that I would have been parented better. I really wish that I would have had that. I would have had that connect. I would love to seen what I say this to myself now, just as I'm saying this to you. I'd love to what I would have become had I had that, secure connection. But then I know that I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. I know that's, that was my path, and that's the way it goes.
That's the piece I got to call on you, because like who you become as a parent would never have occurred had you never gone down that role.
Yeah.
I will guarantee you that.
Yeah, no, and that's true. And just the empathy, I've always been a really sensitive kid. I think if I was born in 2000 as opposed to 1960, I would have been labeled with ADHD for sure. So my mother had to shut me down. My mother, grew up in the bomb shelters of Glasgow when she was 9 or 10 years old, having to go to the bomb shelters every night. So she can't take any loud noises or anything. And I was just, I was like a ball of fire when I was a kid. So I can see how I would have triggered the crap out of my mother.
That's hilarious. That's crazy hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay. So how, I asked you this already because I'm excited to read your book, but I'm listening to this. I've got some stuff I want to understand better. How do I get a hold of you, your book, or find some of these solutions? What's the easiest way to do that?
Probably my website. That's the easiest way to find me, is drruss.com, and just there's a hyphen between, or a dash between the two R's. So it's dr-russ.com. So drruss.com.
Got it.
And there's a contact thing on there. That's usually the best way to kind of track me down. Yeah, I would say, because I have all sorts of, there's Instagram, there's Facebook and stuff, but I would say the website's probably the best way to find me.
Awesome. So listen, I want to thank you so much, first of all, for being here. There's so much of the stuff that I've been able to listen to and be able to apply, not only to myself. Doc, you've probably not been aware of how much I've been absorbing of your material, for how long I've been absorbing it. So I certainly, there's a little piece of you that I have on a pedestal, just have to say it. But I really appreciate you spending the time, the energy, and I just want to acknowledge you for being able to identify this as not necessarily a weakness, within your life, but it's actually now your strength, your passion. And I truly hope that people can dive into the work that you're doing and be able to find a light from the dimmed hole that people are in. So I really hope that more people are able to find your work, my friend. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for just, being yourself and just putting that light into the world, because, we do attract each other. We do attract people that have the same kind of, makeup that we do. And you and I are kindred spirits as far as that goes. And I think we're just putting this stuff into the world, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it, because last 7 years since I retired from medicine, like, I've been pretty much living in my house, studying and writing and stuff, but I haven't really gotten out there. And now that the book's out, I'm ready to get back out there again.
Awesome. Well, I bless it to the world, and can't wait to read my copy. I hope everybody else follows. Thank you very much for your time. Sunny, thank you for coming on as well. I appreciate you coming on to add to the conversation. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, you guys, I will say good night. I'll tidy this up, and I'll release a copy of this if you guys would appreciate it. It'll be part of the podcast. Doc, thank you.
Thank you, man.
Cheers. Sunny, thank you. Bye for now, you guys.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.